Let's make some 1870s drawers. Good day everyone, my name is Caitlin. I'm a living historian who educates other living historians by teaching old-fashioned sewing skills and copying original garments. So we have recently looked at these original drawers, and we did recently a video on how to draft your own drawers. We're going to do a little bit narrower and make some 1870s drawers because I don't have any. So we're going to basically copy these originals as close as I can. I don't know if I have white braiding, so we might have to skip that part. But I can do everything else. I can do the embroidery, I can do the tucks. That's not a problem. So we'll be using these as our construction guide. I hate wearing drawers, but there have been some times where I've needed some. So we're going to go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and draft it. I'm going to be using just regular white cotton. This isn't quite the quality that long cloth is, but it's pretty close and it was cheap, so we're going to use this. I'm going to make 2 pairs today, mostly because I like to have a change and I don't have any 1870s drawers. So we're going to go ahead and get to work. I'm going to put this over. We're going to cut both of them at the same time. That should not be too hard to do. Alright, I already did all the math and everything, so it should fit. Cut them here. Okay. And of course I need 4 pieces because I'm, making 2 pairs. Takes about 2 yards of fabric to make drawers, so I used 4 yards. Now this extra bit is going to end up being my facings. And probably a waistband as well. Oh, can I use this for a waistband? I'd have to piece it in a couple places, but it would be less wasteful. So let's use this stuff for my waistbands. Okay, it's very random, but yes, I have a waistband now. Now the other 2 pieces I need are facings, and this one has very interesting facings, and I think we might try to copy it. So this back one is just folded in, which I can do. This front piece has a facing. Is this on the straighted grain, or it's basically on the straighted grain? Okay. Now she has differently shaped drawers than I do, which is fine. It's just not what I chose to do. I'm going to measure this. So it's thicker on the bottom. It's about 2.5, so I'm going to cut it 3 inches because seam allowance. And a couple inches up, it's 2 inches. And by the end, it is 1.5, which is going to be 2 inches. Alright. It's a weirdly shaped piece, but that will be our facing there. So this is all scrap pack fabric, which I get to use for facings and waistbands and things for other projects. And that is all the pieces that I need to make these. So we can go ahead and get to sewing. We're making 1870s drawers, so obviously we need to use the 1870 sewing machine, right? So we're going to, this is just the body of the drawers. We're going to stitch the legs, so I actually have, legs now. Oh wait, it would help if I put thread in this machine, wouldn't it? These spools are a little bit too big to put here, so I just put them on the table here. And it seems to work okay. Match that up. And then this goes into this. This goes around here. Do this one. This, I always used to miss this one and my stitches wouldn't turn out. You wouldn't think that this would have any bearing on the fact it can make stitches, and apparently it does. It's very important. Wilcox's and Gibbs are fantastic machines, and I find they give you very little problems. All of the problems I've ever had with one of these machines, and I've used several of them, it's all been user error. The only time it hasn't would be the one that was completely rusted through. Obviously that was a problem. But as far as like regular use, yeah, this is just, if it's a problem, it's usually user error. most important thing at this particular step is just to make sure you end up with a left and a right leg. Nothing else really matters. Well, I guess if you're sewing the right seam. Sewing the right seam and making sure you end up with a left and a right. Let's see, do I face it first or do I... Oh, I should have faced it very first thing. Oops. And then the whole thing was sewn together. Well, that's interesting. I wouldn't have done it that way. And I guess I guess it makes sense though. Because how would that have matched up if yeah, I guess that makes sense how she would do that. New question. Do I want to rip out what I just did or do I want to just go with it? Because both are period correct methods. Yeah, let's just copy this one mostly in design, not necessarily technique. Yeah, I'll just face the entire thing. I like doing that anyway because I think it's better in the long run, especially if you wear the drawers a whole lot. Because once this wears out, this is just a hem. There's really not much you can patch it, but it's not as nice as like putting a full facing over it. So yeah, I'll just cut a new facing. That'll be fine. This is why I should look at this before I start sewing and not just assume I know what I'm doing because I've made dozens and dozens of these based on other originals. Because some originals are made differently than others. Now that I'm doing a front and back facing, let's sew the front and back facing together. Now I'm going to stitch it to the drawers. To do, and then I'm gonna iron all that down, turn in the raw edge of that facing because obviously we don't want this sticking out. Want that to be finished, and then I'm going to do 2 steps at once. That I'm going to whip this close because we didn't fell it. The original has it whip stitch, and I did remember that part, so I plan not to fell this. So we're going to whip stitch this all the way down, and then fold that over and just whip the facing down as well. Alright, let's do tucks. The only handwork I did was the whip stitch. I have not finished the facing yet. We will do that together. The 2 little tucks, of course, need to be ironed down, and then we'll iron up the hem. I would love to do the braiding on these. Unfortunately, the braiding I have that's white is shiny. It's like I think it's faux silk, but it's not, like this stuff's supposed to be washable. So it looks like a wool. Maybe, I don't know if they had cotton soutache. I haven't actually looked into that. Now I could make this, like it looks just like cotton pearl that's been literally braided. I do not have the time or patience to braid yards upon yards upon yards of soutache. It's feasible. I don't like working in braids with very small, 16th inch finished braid. It's just the threads tangle too easily. Like, I've tried it. It's not worth the trouble in my opinion. So I think we're gonna leave it plain. We'll just do the scallops and the little eyelets, and that'll be it. So we'll leave the braiding, which is unfortunate. I like the braiding. I just don't think we can get something similar to that in a natural fiber that's going to be good and washable. And I'm not making it. So we'll just do the embroidery. It'll be fine. I have a left and a right leg here. This is the center front. I'm going to stitch it together by hand with a whip stitch or a seam stitch. Just about 1 3/4 inches. And it does look like it is done from the front side, which is what I'm doing. I would have done it from the back. It definitely looks on the original like it's done from the front. So we're gonna try this. Now there will be, when I get out my buttonhole thread, a nice larger stitch to really hold that together, because this is going to be put under some pressure and some strain. So we definitely want to make sure that is nice and held together. So I'm going to do that with a thicker thread though, just like the original did. She used a thicker thread. Now some drawers overlap, so you would take this and like overlap it a little bit, and that gives you a little bit more coverage. This one happens to seam it together. Both are fine. Overlapping is probably a little bit more common in my experience. I'm going to get some thicker thread, because my next step is going to be gathering thread all across the waist of these. So that's what that looks like. And there's the back. Again, I haven't sewn that together yet. But all of this is going to need to be gathered. So I'm going to go ahead and get a thicker thread, gather it all in. Actually, yeah, because I want to be able to put the waist band on by machine. Alright, this is drawers number 1. I'm hemming them. And I think on the second drawers, I do want to do the embroidery. I did embroidery on one leg of these, and it just doesn't look the same without the soutache. It doesn't. And I know I can do the soutache later, even though I don't have the soutache right now. It doesn't look as good as I was hoping. So I think I'm going to finish out this pair, because I've already done the one leg of this pair. And then I'm thinking I might do something different with that second one. I found one from the Met that utilizes some pre-done white work, and I have some. And so I think we might do that and just make them different. And then down the road, yes, I can come back and add soutache to this, or add something to these. It just doesn't have the same effect that the original had. I mean, it's cute. Like, it looks fine. It doesn't look bad. It needs something right there. And I feel like I'm putting a lot of handwork into something that isn't impressive, if that makes sense. Alright, working on the eyelets first. So what I did is I took the original and I just kind of traced out where the scallops go. I guess I'm not working on this eyelets, I'm working on the scallops. Anyway, so I traced them out from the original with the pencil, and then I'm just kind of cutting them out as I can. So for scallops, it's just a buttonhole stitch. None of my scallops are particularly even, but that's because, again, I'm tracing them from the original, and the original is a lot less even than they look. I think mine look a little less even, and I'm still trying to figure out how she managed to get hers to look so even when you take a measuring tape out and they're not even at all. And mine don't look even they're straight from hers, and hers do. So I want to know the trick that she used. Maybe it's just me having a critical eye on my own work, whereas with her work, it's not something that I did. I tend to be a lot more critical when I look at pieces that I've done as opposed to what other people have done. Alright, I'm going to finish this embroidery. So I'm doing the eyelets using a knitting needle instead of an awl, because that's what I used on the last one. And I'm going to try to make it consistent. So just kind of pull apart the fibers, try not to break them. Sometimes I do, but try not to. And there's 2 ways you can do eyelets for white work or embroidery on glaze. You can do the buttonhole stitch around, you absolutely can do that. Or you can do the easy way and just wrap it, so it's just encasing that raw edge and and it is much faster than doing a buttonhole stitch. I personally think the buttonhole stitch looks really good on eyelets, and when I'm doing eyelets for like an evening dress or something that's going to close with eyelets, I would prefer to do the buttonhole stitch because of how it looks, and I think it's a little bit stronger. But on something that's purely decorative like this, it's a lot faster to do it this way. I would say on little small eyelets like this, I see the wrap more often than I see the buttonhole stitch. And it's just one eyelet per scallop, just right in the middle. Very nearly done, so 3 more. And then I think I'm gonna go ahead and get the other one finished on the hem as well, and that way I can work on them both for the last few steps simultaneously at the same time, because I do think that helps with speed. You know, doing the same step twice. You don't have to go grab supplies, you don't have to process what you're doing. I think it just eliminates a few steps. Alright, this is the facing that's getting whipped in. And this is the second pair that we are doing a different decoration with. And so I found an original pair. It had an insertion and then a slightly gathered ruffle, which is why it's later than 1860s, because usually in the 1860s and before we'd have the set on plainly. We wouldn't have it gathered at all. I couldn't find an insertion that I liked, and I was also concerned with how wide this was and how, because I'd already done the tucks and I didn't want the drawers to end up being too long. If I'd added like an inch insertion, that would have made them an inch longer than I had originally planned. Had I just not done the tucks yet, I would have just moved them up an inch and then cut down and then cut off part of the hem, which I did cut off about 1.25 inches of the fabric, but that was to accommodate to add this. So I think we're just going to do the edging and not the insertion. So we have the 2 tucks and the slightly gathered lace, and I did, sewed it on the machine, and then I whipped this closed, which is basically exactly what I did per the original on the inside. So kind of tried to match the continuity of that. So I have the other leg, and I did about 1 3/4 the amount of this in the edging. So it's not super full gathered, but it's nice, but it still gives that little gathered effect without wasting too much of the edging. I marked the corners, so I'm just going to match those real quick, and that way we can pull the gathering thread that I put in. So you can see it's not very fully gathered at all. It's just a little bit, just enough to give the illusion that there's gathers. So this will get pinned in, and then we'll go sew it in by machine. This whip stitch is just to somewhat finish off the edges that are raw. It's not something we would normally think of doing today, but this is pretty common back then. Usually not on underwear though. Normally we fill underwear because it just feels better against the skin, but this one had it in here, so I'm doing the same thing on the leg here just to keep the continuity of it. Alright, so that's the bottom of these. Next we're going to put on a waistband. Make sure that this is the right side, because we're going to do right sides together. And I put in a gathering thread. Pleats would also be appropriate. For things like this, I always prefer to do a gather. And the original does it differently. It does it, let's see, how do I describe this? So it's, usually you would press those in, and you put it to one side, and you whip by hand all the way across, and then you flip it, pretend that's sewn, flip it to the other side, and you whip it on this side. So that's how you would typically do a waistband by hand. Because I am doing mine by machine, I am going to stitch one side by machine. Say doing it by hand, by doing this part entirely by hand like the original, I do think the gathers lay better. They're a little bit more like stroke gathers, where they are somewhat in between gathering and gauging. It's like a more controlled version of gathering, and they look really pretty. I do think so. For these, I don't think that amount of work, especially when I'm already machine sewing part of this, no one's ever going to see them that up close. And I'm already doing machine work where the original would have had, when the original did it by hand anyway. So I'm totally fine with doing this technique instead of the other one. And both are period techniques. It's just a matter of which you prefer. I think, given that I have machine sewn them so far, that this is probably the more accurate method. Alright, we are winding down, getting the last few things done on the drawers. So this is the waistband that we've already stitched in by machine, and I'm just whipping it on the back to keep it down and keep the raw edges encased. Feels like I have a knot in my thread, but I keep looking and there's no knot. Oh, it's on the tail. That makes a lot of sense. Let's cut that off. That should make it a little easier to go through. I don't know exactly how I'm going to display them for the end of this video. Maybe put them on the dark colored carpet in the living room. I'm not wearing them, obviously. They are split crotch. So I think on the carpet would be the best way to display them. Alright. Now we're going to do closures, and that's the very last step here. Original uses a really pretty, y'all can't see that, really pretty mother of pearl button. Mine isn't very pretty, but it is still a mother of pearl button, slightly bigger than the one she used, which I have smaller ones this size. I like this size better. It is just stitching. Hers is a 4-hole, mine is a 2-hole, so that will make a little bit of difference on how I sew it in. But on the other end, there's a buttonhole, a very nicely done buttonhole. Like, let's see if I get it there. I don't know if y'all can see that. Like, that is so beautiful, so gorgeous, done by hand. Mine won't look like that. I do struggle with my buttonholes, but yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. I'm putting the button on my left side and the buttonhole on my right side. The original is flip-flopped, but this is really, I've seen them on both sides on originals. It seems to me like personal preference on what you prefer. I prefer going right over left when it's behind me, and so that's what I'm doing for my drawers. Because you are copying an original, you don't know what preferences that person had. You don't know if someone is assisting them in getting dressed. Probably not probably not for that person. And that can make your preferences differ. Whether you're left or right-handed can make that preference differ. So many things go into that. And so that's something that I've learned not, you don't have to copy exactly. I copied one of my original dresses several years ago. And I had the hardest time getting it on that dress on and off. And I hated that the pocket was on the left side. I ended up giving that dress away to a friend. But I was so intent on copying the original exactly that I didn't think of what a person who was like me would have done. That dress with the pocket on the left side and how the buttons and how the closures were done was a left-handed person. I'm not left-handed. That was not something I really needed to copy exactly, because there are definitely right-handed people in the time period too. This buttonhole is done slightly differently, so I'm going to attempt to copy hers a little bit more. Maybe I like the style of buttonhole better than what I usually do. Well, we're about to find out. So now that corner is done, I'm going to stitch across a couple times. I guess this strengthens the back end. Okay. And then I'm going to just continue. And the front part is more rounded, so I'll try that as well. Okay, it's not the best looking buttonhole I've ever done, but it still looks halfway decent. And it is underwear, so no one's really going to see it. Anyway, we are now done, so we're going to go put these out with the original and just kind of admire them for half a minute before we end the video. Alright, there we are. So, have them in the living room so it's a little bit easier to see, everything. So both drawers, and the one in the middle is the original. So I just kind of have it tucked up so you can kind of see the embroidery as well. I'm liking the embroidery that I did a little bit more now. I think when I was just staring at it, it looked very plain and not impressive. Now that I'm seeing it like all together as a garment, I think it looks fine. Could it use a little bit more decoration? Sure. And down the road, when I invest in a little bit of soutache for this, yeah, we'll definitely add that. Technically, I have a night dress that I made many years ago, and I didn't have access to soutache, so I used sugar and cream yarn to do the braiding, which A, doesn't look good, and B, isn't correct. So I have it on my list to find some soutache that I can redo that braiding in, and there's also a matching nightcap for that. And so I just buy, you know, 10, 15, 20 yards extra and do this at the same time, which I think would be totally doable. And I can just buy a little bit of extra and do this as well, and I think that'd be totally doable. So we can revisit these later and just do a little bit more braiding on it. I'd rather have something more matte, more on the wool or cotton side than the silk side. And so I think I'm just going to need to be on the hunt for that. I'm pretty sure there are people who sell it. I don't know if Needle and Thread will sell it. I'm pretty sure William Booth Draper does. I'll just go do a little bit of digging. I'm sure it can't be that hard to find. I say that now, but we'll see. I'm sure there's something out there I can use. And we'll come back and revisit this and just have a braiding video or something of that nature. Other than that, I am very pleased with my drawers. I don't care to wear drawers, but I definitely needed some 70s, 80s drawers because I really didn't have anything. I don't know if I'm going to actually attend the event that I made these for in July. Something came up where we might be going to Gettysburg instead, which I'm kind of excited about, but also I really wanted to go to this event because it's been a while since I've been to McCavitt, and there's lots of fun people going, and so I'm kind of sad to miss that. If I do end up going to that event, I have drawers, and if not, they'll be worn at Concho in December for Christmas. So it's not that they will never get worn, it's just I will have to wait a little bit longer. But for now, I have appropriate 1870s and 1880s underwear, which I absolutely needed to add to the wardrobe because, you know, underwear is important. I didn't have any. Anyway, if you've enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe to the channel, click that little bell notification so you're notified anytime I upload a new video. And as always, have a fantastic week. I'll see you back here in the next video.